When I first saw Bosnian pottery, I recognized that it was handmade and not made from a mold like all the other pottery I'd seen in markets and shops throughout the Balkans. I mistakenly thought it was made the same way I made pottery, starting with a lump of clay, which is turned into a cup or bowl or jar, and the wheel turned by a motor or by kicking with a foot. What I found instead is the subject of this video.
Ibro Sabanovic is a third-generation potter living in the small town of Lijezova near Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He learned pottery making from his father and from his grandfather, making how to make traditional Bosnian pots for cooking in. As you can see, Ibro is making a cup on a wheel that he spins with his hand. The wheel was built by his grandfather and consists of a heavy wooden circular wheel head mounted on a wooden shaft with a metal bearing to allow it to spin freely. Ibro's been making pottery for the past 20 or so years. His father passed away during the Balkan War, and it was decided between Ibro and his brother that Ibro should continue the pottery making, as it was a long family tradition. Now, in the techniques that Ibro uses, he doesn't use a lot of water on the clay, and this is what allows him to be able to put a handle directly onto the cup immediately after making it, not having to wait for it to stiffen up as most of us do. He spends a lot of time finishing the surfaces of the pots, making sure there are no rough edges, because there's no glaze applied to this pottery. As you'll see later, the firing method imparts a finish that allows it to be used for liquids and to eat out of. In this video, we get to see Ibro make a ewer. In Bosnian, it's pronounced Ibrik. He starts with a small piece of clay that he's flattened out and centered on the wheel to create the base of the ewer, to which he attaches several thick coils to build up a cylinder shape. Uses very little water. His clay is very soft, and this is clay, by the way, that Ibro digs himself from a source in the woods near his house. Here he's using a piece of wet leather to apply lubrication while he's pulling up the coiled cylinder into a taller shape. The wheel spins for a long time because it is balanced on a metal ball bearing, and just a spin of the wrist will propel the wheel for a good long time. He's adding another small coil and then bringing up the neck of the ewer, trims off a little irregularity. And with the help of the wet leather, brings it up a little taller. There is using the knuckle of his index finger to pull the neck up taller. Ibro and his family are Muslim. Bosnia and Herzegovina is about 45% Muslim in population, and there are mosques scattered all over the areas of Bosnia that are predominantly Muslim. And at the time I made this video, it was Ramadan, the holy month for Muslim. And during Ramadan, Muslims are required to fast during daylight hours. Fortunately, Ibro was able to accommodate me for this video during that time. Here you see Ibro inserted a tapered wooden stick into the belly of the ewer and has applied a handle and is using another small stick inserted in the hole to provide support as he presses the base of the handle onto the belly of the ewer. Now he's going to make a spout out of a small piece of clay, and using that tapered wooden dowel as a former for the clay to create a spout. He quickly squeezes the clay down onto the dowel and then trims the end of it while it's still on the dowel, and then cuts it to length. Then slides the whole piece off, takes the dowel away from the excess, pinches the thickness out a little bit on the bottom end, and then inserts it into the hole. And notice in the hole the shoulder around the edge of the hole, which will aid in attaching the base of the spout to the ewer. And then it's a matter of alignment of the ewer with the handle, cleaning up all traces of slip and clay, excess clay that might be a hard edge in the finished piece. And then trimming the bottom edge of the ewer, giving it a little roundness. So this little pot would be used for pouring oil or other types of liquids. And that's it. That took about 10 minutes from start to finish. In this video, we get to see Ibro as he creates a bosanski lonac, or a Bosnian stew pot. He starts with a flattened piece of clay that he trims into a circle, and then adds a series of thick coils to create a tall cylinder shape. Uses very little water so the clay retains its strength. The clay is very soft, and so it adheres through pressure to itself very well. And then Ibro gives the wheel a spin and he pulls the cylinder up, thinning the walls to the proper thickness, and then adds another coil. Creates a finished rim, and then begins to belly out the pot to create the rounded shape that he wants. I asked Ibro if he'd ever considered using a wheel that was turned by a motor, because I was watching him continually have to spin the wheel because it would slow down due to the size of the pot. And he replied that he didn't make large enough pots that often that required a motor. And he did have that option available. There was a friend, another potter, who has a powered wheel, but Ibro didn't have a need for it. So there you have a bosanski lonach. In this segment, we're going to watch Ibro as he makes a kovanje lonach, which is a baking dish. He starts with a piece of clay that he mixes and presses out into a flat slab, sprinkles a little sand on the bottom, and turns that onto a bat. He presses it out flat to the appropriate thickness, and then marks 2 circles. The outer circle is a guide for trimming the slab into an oblong shape. Trimming the ends into symmetrical curves, and then pressing the bottom out even thinner and creating a raised edge to which he will begin attaching coils. He uses a needle to poke through any potential air holes, air bubbles that could be a weak spot in the piece if left. Presses the bottom smooth with his hand. Now he's taking some clay and working it together, mixing mixing it to an even consistency and creating a thick coil to which he attaches, compressing with both hands. Smoothing and pulling the wall up. He attached 4 coils for this baking dish. Taking care to join each coil to the previous one, and then using a wooden rib to smooth and thin the walls even further. Here's a stick with a nail protruding that allows the rim to be trimmed evenly, and then a wet leather for compressing and shaping the rim, and using both hands while the wheel is turning slowly to compress and smooth the walls. He took a lot of care to compress and smooth the bottom because these pots are intended to be used. They're used for cooking traditional Bosnian meals. Braised meat, stewed vegetables, primarily in the wintertime. they will have a wood-fired stove in their kitchen alongside their modern gas stove. And in the wintertime, when it's very cold, they'll have that wood stove going to cook their food on and to help warm the house. Now, because he didn't use a lot of water, again, he's able to put handles on the pot immediately. Ibro sells his pots to restaurants and markets all over Bosnia. That's the restaurants that specialize in traditional Bosnian cuisine. Adding a little bit of an impressed decoration, and it's done. Now we're going to see the process that Ibro uses to fire his pottery. 20 years ago, he built this kiln in the style of the ancient Roman kilns. It's an open cylinder with walls about a foot thick, made of brick and clay, with a floor about a foot and a half off the ground, under which is built a wood fire, and the pots are stacked on top of this floor and fill the cylinder to the top. And care is taken in placing each pot with an eye for how it will be able to be removed from the kiln while they are red hot. The loading was done on a Thursday afternoon and took about an hour and a half. And here you see Ibro has the pieces stacked up near the top of the kiln, and he's placing small lids and covers on top. These will be the first pieces removed. And now he's placing metal pieces over the top of the stack of pots. And these metal pieces have been used many times before. And as you will see, there's a very good reason for using so many small pieces. Then a small fire is built and allowed to burn overnight until the next afternoon. In preparation for the firing, Ibro stacks a good bit of wood over the top of the kiln so that it can be dried out and warmed up by the preheating of the pottery. And then on Friday afternoon, the firing commences. He's removing all of that wood and stacking it to the side as he begins stoking it in earnest. Now here he is mixing flour and water, stirring it up to create a smooth liquid mixture into which each pot will be dunked as it comes out of the kiln. Ibro didn't have a name for this finish. He just called it the paint or the coating. But we would recognize it by the term obvara, which many people are doing today as a decorative technique. But here in Bosnia, this is a traditional method of finishing the pottery of their cooking pots because it imparts a dense, burned-on coating that makes them suitable for use to eat out of. Now here you see the firing has been increased over the course of about 4 or 5 hours, and now the pots are being removed and dunked one at a time in that flour and water mixture. Using tongs to grasp each piece, and they're shifting those metal pieces away so that access can be given to the pots while protecting the ones that are still in the kiln, keeping them from cooling down. Now here you see a piece after it's been dunked, and as it slowly turns darker until it's a solid black color. Ibro says that his customers require them to be solid black, or else they believe they're not the best quality. Out of all the pieces that he fired that day, they only found one that cracked. It was a very good day.
Lijepa. Dobar posao. Radni dan, cavi.
Tell him